Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and looked out at the new world below them. The planet they called New Terra stretched out like a green and blue marble against the black space. 50,000 humans now called this place home, making it the farthest human settlement from Earth. Jake had been in charge of this colony for 2 years now, and every day brought new challenges. The colony ships had arrived at Kepler 442b after a long journey through space. The planet was perfect for humans, with clean air, fresh water, and land that could grow crops. The colonists had built New Terra City near the equator, where the weather stayed warm most of the year. Farms spread out in all directions, and the first factories were starting to make the tools and machines they needed. Dr. Lisa Park worked in the science building at the center of the city. She studied alien life forms, though so far they had only found simple plants and small animals. Lisa spent most of her time looking at soil samples and running tests on the local plant life. She had hoped to find something more interesting, but the planet seemed quiet and peaceful. That morning started like any other. Jake was drinking his coffee and reading reports from the night shift when his communication officer, Amy Walsh, called out from her station. Her voice sounded different, more excited than usual. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange from the northern continent," Amy said. She turned to look at him, her eyes wide. "It's not natural, sir. This is definitely artificial." Jake set down his coffee cup and walked over to Amy's station. The screens showed wave patterns that moved in perfect mathematical sequences. The signal was strong and clear, coming from somewhere about 2,000 miles north of their city. "How long has this been broadcasting?" Jake asked. "I first noticed it about an hour ago, but the computer shows it started 3 days ago," Amy replied. "We must have missed it because it was so weak at first. Now it's getting stronger every hour." Jake called Chief Engineer Ben Cole to the bridge. Ben was a big man with rough hands who could fix anything that broke. When he arrived, Jake showed him the signal patterns on Amy's screens. "What do you think, Ben?" Jake asked. "Could this be some kind of machine left behind by an old civilization?" Ben studied the patterns for several minutes. He rubbed his chin, thinking hard. "It's possible, Captain. The signal is too organized to be natural. Someone or something built whatever is sending this." Jake decided to call Dr. Park to the bridge. When Lisa arrived, she looked at the signal data with great interest. As a scientist, she was always excited to discover something new. "This is amazing," Lisa said. "The mathematical patterns are incredibly complex. Whoever built this has advanced knowledge of physics and engineering." For the next 3 days, Lisa and her team worked around the clock to understand the signal. They ran the data through every computer program they had. Slowly, they began to see that the signal contained patterns that looked like language. Amy helped with the translation work. She had studied many human languages and understood how communication systems worked. Together, Amy and Lisa made slow progress breaking down the alien message. On the 4th day, they had their breakthrough. Lisa ran into the command center, her face pale and her hands shaking. Jake knew immediately that something was very wrong. "Captain, we've translated part of the message," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to hear this." She played the translated message through the bridge speakers. A cold, mechanical voice filled the room. "Primitive species detected. Prepare for cleansing. The hegemony claims this world." The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at the speakers as if they couldn't believe what they had just heard. Jake felt his stomach drop. This was not the peaceful first contact that humans had always dreamed about. "There's more," Lisa continued. "The message is broadcasting on every frequency we can detect. And Captain, it's in perfect English. They know our language." Amy's hands flew over her control panel, checking all communication channels. "She's right, sir. The signal is everywhere. They're broadcasting it across the entire planet." Ben spoke up from his station. "Captain, if they know our language, they've been watching us. They know we're here, and they know how many of us there are." Jake tried to stay calm, but his mind was racing. 50,000 colonists were depending on him to keep them safe. The nearest Earthship was months away, and they had no military vessels in the system. "Lisa, is there any chance we've made a mistake in the translation?" Jake asked. hoping against hope. Lisa shook her head. I've checked it 20 times, Captain. The message is clear. Someone is claiming this planet and they consider us primitive. The word cleansing can only mean one thing. Over the next hour, more of the message was decoded. Each new section made their situation worse. The aliens called themselves the hegemony, and they had protocols for dealing with primitive species. The word extermination appeared multiple times in the transmission. Jake called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. Ben Cole, Dr. Park, Amy Walsh, and Security Chief Pete Hamilton gathered in the conference room. Jake looked around the table at these people who had become his family over the past 2 years. We need to prepare for the worst, Jake said. If these aliens are hostile, we have 50,000 civilians to protect. Ben spoke first. Captain, our ships weren't built for combat. We have cargo vessels, construction equipment, and civilian transports. We don't have weapons. We can change that, Pete Hamilton said. The security chief was a former military man who understood combat. We have mining explosives, construction lasers, and industrial equipment. We can turn our ships into weapons if we have to. Amy was already working on another problem. I'm going to try to communicate with them, Captain. Maybe we can negotiate or find out what they want. Do it, Jake said. But be careful what you transmit. We don't want to give them any information about our defenses or capabilities. Dr. Park had been quiet during the meeting, but now she spoke up. Captain, I think we need to consider evacuation. If these aliens have faster-than-light travel and advanced weapons, we might not be able to fight them. How long would it take to evacuate everyone? Jake asked. Ben did quick calculations in his head. Our biggest ship can carry 5,000 people. We have 12 ships that size. Even if we pack them beyond safe limits, it would take multiple trips. We're talking about months, not days or weeks. Jake made his decision. We prepare for both possibilities. Ben, start converting what ships you can into combat vessels. Pete, organize the colonists into defensive groups and identify shelter locations. Amy, keep trying to communicate with the hegemony. Lisa, I want you to learn everything you can about their technology from that signal. 3 days later, Amy received a response to her communication attempts. The message was short and terrifying. Compliance is not an option. Resistance will accelerate termination. Jake stood on his bridge and looked down at New Terra City. The colonists were going about their daily lives, working in the fields, teaching, children in schools building their new civilization. Most of them didn't know about the alien threat yet. Jake had decided to keep the information limited to essential personnel until they had a plan. Now he faced the hardest decision of his life. Should he tell 50,000 people that aliens had declared war on them? Should he try to evacuate everyone, knowing it might be impossible? Or should he prepare to fight an enemy they knew nothing about? As Jake wrestled with these questions, long-range sensors detected something new. 3 objects were approaching the system at incredible speed. They would arrive in less than 3 weeks. The hegemony was coming to New Terra, and humanity was about to face its first alien war. 3 weeks passed faster than Jake Morrison had ever imagined possible. The objects detected by long-range sensors were not just 3 ships, but 12 massive vessels that emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Terra system. Each alien ship was over 5 kilometers long, making them larger than anything humans had ever built. They looked like they had been grown rather than constructed, with smooth curves and crystalline surfaces that reflected the light of New Terra's sun. Admiral Kate Sullivan had arrived just days before with every military ship Earth could spare. Her fleet consisted of 8 destroyers, 4 heavy cruisers, and her flagship, the USS Retribution. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, but it looked tiny compared to the alien vessels that now moved steadily toward New Terra. Jake watched the alien fleet from the bridge of his ship, which now bristled with makeshift weapons. Ben Cole had worked miracles over the past 3 weeks, converting mining lasers into ship-to-ship weapons and loading cargo holds with every explosive device the colony could produce. The USS Defiance was no longer just a colony ship. It was humanity's determination made real. Dr. Lisa Park had spent every waking moment studying the alien signals. She had learned that the crystalline ships were not just vessels. but living organisms that had been modified and enhanced with technology. The hulls appeared to be made of some kind of biological material that could repair itself and adapt to different environments. Captain Morrison, Amy Walsh called from her communication station. The alien fleet has stopped just outside the orbit of New Terra's largest moon. They're taking up positions around the planet. Jake looked at the tactical display that showed the alien ships forming a perfect sphere around New Terra. Each ship was positioned with mathematical precision, creating a blockade that would prevent any human vessel from escaping the system. Admiral Sullivan's voice came over the communication system from her flagship. All ships, this is Admiral Sullivan. The alien fleet has taken blockade positions. They have not responded to any of our communication attempts. We must assume hostile intent. Lieutenant Commander Steve Rogers led the reconnaissance squadron that Admiral Sullivan had ordered to get close-range scans of the alien vessels. Steve was a skilled pilot who had volunteered for the dangerous mission of flying close enough to the alien ships to gather detailed information about their capabilities. Steve's fighter approached one of the smaller alien vessels, staying just outside what his instruments indicated was weapons range. His scanners worked overtime, recording every detail of the strange crystalline hull and the energy patterns that flowed beneath its surface. "This is incredible," Steve reported over the radio. "The entire hull is covered in some kind of organic pattern like veins or nerves. I'm detecting massive energy signatures from what must be their power systems. And there are huge cargo bays filled with what look like millions of stasis pods. The stasis pods were the most disturbing discovery. Each alien ship carried enough pods to hold millions of beings in suspended animation. The implications were terrifying. Humans realized these aliens were not just conquerors, but collectors who preserved the species they encountered. Dr. Park was analyzing Steve's scan data when the aliens began their first action. Without warning, beams of pure energy lanced down from the alien ships toward New Terra's northern continent. The beams were not aimed at human settlements but at specific locations across the barren landscape. "They're bombarding the archaeological sites," Lisa said, her voice filled with horror. "The ruins we found last year, the ancient structures we thought were built by a previous civilization, they're destroying all of them." The bombardment was surgical and precise. Each energy beam struck ancient ruins that humans had discovered but not yet fully explored. The aliens were systematically erasing evidence of whoever had lived on New Terra before humans arrived. Jake realized the terrible truth. They've done this before. The stasis pods, the precise destruction of ruins, this is their standard procedure. They don't just conquer worlds. They erase the history of everyone who came before. When the bombardment ended after 6 hours, the aliens transmitted their final message to the human fleet. The same cold mechanical voice that had first announced their arrival now delivered what could only be described as a death sentence. Archaeological contamination eliminated. Proceed with species evaluation. Standard extermination protocols authorized. Admiral Sullivan ordered her fleet to battle stations. Every human ship, military and civilian alike, prepared for what they all knew would be a desperate fight against impossible odds. The alien ships began moving toward New Terra, their crystalline hulls gleaming with deadly purpose. Jake found himself thinking about the 50,000 colonists on the planet below. They were farmers, teachers, engineers, and families who had traveled across space to build a new life. None of them had signed up for a war against aliens, but war had found them anyway. Ben Cole reported from the engine room that all weapon systems were ready. The mining lasers had been modified to their maximum power output, and every cargo bay was loaded with explosives that could be launched at the alien ships. It wasn't much against vessels that dwarfed human technology, but it was everything they had. The first shots of the war were fired by Admiral Sullivan's flagship. The USS Retribution opened fire with every weapon it had, sending streams of plasma and kinetic projectiles toward the nearest alien vessel. The weapon struck the crystalline hull and seemed to do nothing at all. The alien ship continued its approach without even slowing down. The alien response was devastating. Beams of energy that made their planetary bombardment look gentle swept across the human fleet. The destroyer USS Yorktown took a direct hit and simply vanished in a burst of light. There was no explosion, no debris. The ship and its 300 crew members were gone. Steve Rogers led his fighter squadron in a desperate attack on the alien ship's weapon systems. The small, fast human fighters darted between the massive alien vessels, trying to find weak points in their defenses. Several fighters were destroyed by defensive weapons that seemed to anticipate their every move. On New Terra's surface, Marine Colonel Dan Price was organizing the ground defenses. Dan had fought in conflicts on 3 different worlds, but nothing had prepared him for defending against an alien invasion. He positioned his Marines in the forests around New Terra City, setting up positions where they could ambush any landing forces. The Colonel's preparations proved wise when the first alien landing craft descended from the orbiting fleet. The craft were as organic-looking as the ships, resembling giant insects more than traditional vehicles. They landed in clearings throughout the forest, and strange figures began emerging from their holds. The aliens were 3 meters tall with 6 limbs and natural armor plating that covered their entire bodies. Their faces were insect-like, with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked constantly as they moved. Plasma weapons were integrated into their arms, making them living weapon systems rather than soldiers carrying equipment. What struck Colonel Price as most disturbing was how they moved. Every alien soldier moved in perfect coordination with the others, as if they were all controlled by a single mind. There was no individual initiative, no personal decision-making, just flawless group movement toward their objectives. Dr. Park was monitoring the alien communications from her laboratory when she made another terrible discovery. The aliens were not individual beings at all, but extensions of a collective consciousness. Each soldier was like a finger on a hand, controlled by a central intelligence that could coordinate millions of troops simultaneously. Back in space, Admiral Sullivan watched in horror as half her fleet was destroyed or disabled within the first hour of battle. The human weapons seemed to have no effect on the alien hulls, while the alien energy weapons cut through human armor like it wasn't there. Jake Morrison made a decision that would define the rest of the battle. Loading his ship with every explosive device in the cargo hold, he set course directly for one of the smaller alien vessels. If human weapons couldn't penetrate their hulls, maybe a ship full of explosives detonating inside their defenses could do some damage. The USS Defiance raced toward the alien ship at full speed, while Jake's crew fired every weapon they had to clear a path. Alien defensive systems tried to stop the approaching ship, but Jake's desperate maneuver caught them by surprise. The collision between the human colony ship and the alien vessel created an explosion visible from the planet's surface. For a moment, everyone hoped that Jake's sacrifice had destroyed the alien ship. Then the light faded, and the alien vessel emerged from the explosion with only minor damage to its hull. But something had changed. The alien ship was damaged, proving that they were not invincible. More importantly, Dr. Park's instruments had recorded valuable data during the explosion. The organic hull material had reacted to specific electromagnetic frequencies in a way that disrupted its cellular structure. As the battle raged in space and alien soldiers advanced through New Terra's forests, Lisa Park worked frantically to understand what she had discovered. The aliens' greatest strength, their living ships and collective consciousness, might also be their greatest weakness. The second day of the war began with Dr. Lisa Park broadcasting her discovery to every human ship and ground unit still fighting. Her voice cut through the chaos of battle with information that could change everything about how humanity fought these invaders. All units, this is Dr. Park. The alien hulls are vulnerable to electromagnetic frequencies at 847.3 MHz. I repeat, 847.3 MHz disrupts their cellular structure. Chief Engineer Cole is already modifying our weapon systems. Ben. Cole had survived the destruction of the USS Defiance by transferring to Admiral Sullivan's flagship just hours before Jake Morrison's final attack. Now he worked with desperate efficiency to modify every remaining human weapon to broadcast the frequency that Dr. Park had discovered. The modification process was not simple. Human weapons were designed to deliver kinetic force or plasma energy, not specific electromagnetic frequencies. Ben had to rewire power systems, modify targeting computers, and install new transmission arrays while battles raged around him. Colonel Dan Price received Dr. Park's transmission while leading his Marines through a running battle in New Terra's dense forests. The alien soldiers moved through the trees with mechanical precision, their plasma weapons cutting down anything in their path. But Dan had noticed something important about how they fought. They're predictable, Dan told his sergeant Mike Torres as they took cover behind a fallen tree. Watch how they move. Every squad follows the exact same pattern, like they're reading from a manual. Mike had been studying the alien movements too. You're right, Colonel. They sweep left to right in perfect formation, always checking the same positions in the same order. If we can get ahead of their pattern, we can ambush them. Dan's Marines began using guerrilla tactics that no collective consciousness could anticipate. They set traps where the aliens least expected them, attacked from directions that made no tactical sense, and retreated when logic said they should advance. The alien soldiers, controlled by their hive mind, could not adapt to the chaotic and seemingly random human tactics. In space, the modified human weapons were having their first test against the alien fleet. Chief Engineer Cole had managed to modify the USS Retribution's main guns to broadcast Dr. Park's frequency, along with their normal plasma fire. When Admiral Sullivan ordered the first test shot, the results exceeded everyone's expectations. The beam struck an alien cruiser, and the effect was immediate. The crystalline hull began to deteriorate where the frequency hit it, spreading outward like an infection. Within minutes, a hole large enough for a fighter craft had opened in the alien ship's side. All ships, concentrate fire on the damaged vessel, Admiral Sullivan ordered. Use conventional weapons on the breach points where their hull has been weakened. Lieutenant Commander Steve Rogers led his remaining fighters through the hole in the alien hull. What they found inside was unlike anything humans had imagined. The interior of the ship was not built with corridors and rooms, but was one vast organic space filled with pulsing walls and flowing streams of nutrient fluid. It's like being inside a living creature, Steve reported as his fighters navigated through the strange environment. The walls are moving, trying to repair the damage we caused, and there are thousands of those stasis pods everywhere. Steve's squadron planted explosive charges throughout the alien ship's interior before fighting their way back to the breach point. The explosion that followed was visible across the entire battlefield, as the first hegemony vessel was completely destroyed. The destruction of one of their ships caused an immediate change in alien behavior. The remaining 11 ships broke their perfect formation and began moving in more aggressive patterns. Dr. Park realized that losing a ship had disrupted their collective consciousness, forcing them to adapt their tactics. On the ground, Colonel Price's Marines had discovered another weakness in the alien ground forces. While the soldiers themselves were heavily armored and dangerous, their command structure was centralized. Each group of alien soldiers was controlled by a single command unit that looked different from the others. Sergeant Mike Torres led a squad that managed to capture one of these command units during a fierce firefight in the ruins of an abandoned mining station. The device was organic, like everything else the aliens used, but it pulsed with energy that connected it to the alien network. Dr. Park examined the captured command unit and made another breakthrough discovery. This isn't just a communication device, she explained to Colonel Price over their tactical radio. It's a biological computer that processes the collective consciousness for local units. If we can disrupt these command nodes, we can break their coordination. The knowledge of how to disrupt alien command structures spread quickly through the human forces. Marines began targeting the command units instead of trying to fight the heavily armored soldiers. When a command unit was destroyed, the alien soldiers in that area would stand motionless for several minutes, completely helpless. Chief Engineer Cole had been working for 12 straight hours to modify more human ships with the frequency weapons. His team had successfully converted 6 destroyers and 2 cruisers when the alien fleet launched a coordinated attack on the human shipyards orbiting New Terra's moon. The wire attack was different from their previous methodical approach. The alien ships moved with desperate aggression, no longer concerned about maintaining perfect formations. They had learned from the destruction of their sister ship and adapted their tactics accordingly. Admiral Sullivan found herself fighting a running battle through the asteroid field near New Terra's moon, using the rocky debris as cover while her modified weapons tore holes in alien hulls. The battle was fierce and chaotic, nothing like the precise warfare the aliens seemed to prefer. Steve Rogers had transferred his fighter squadron to one of the modified destroyers when he noticed something strange about the alien fleet's behavior. Admiral, the alien ships are trying to stay in communication range of each other. When we forced 2 of them apart earlier, they both stopped firing for almost 10 minutes. Dr. Park was monitoring alien communications from her laboratory on New Terra's surface when she realized what Steve had observed. The collective consciousness requires constant communication between all units. If we can jam their communications or force their ships apart, we can disrupt their ability to coordinate attacks. Amy Walsh, who had been trying to communicate with the aliens since their first arrival, finally found a way to tap into their quantum communication network. What she discovered changed humanity's understanding of what they were fighting. Colonel Price, Dr. Park, Admiral Sullivan, you need to hear this, Amy announced over the tactical network. I've been listening to their internal communications. The hegemony isn't just one alien species. There are dozens of different species that have been conquered and assimilated into their collective. The stasis pods that Steve Rogers had seen inside the alien ships were not just storage devices. They were libraries of conquered civilizations. Each pod contained genetic samples, cultural information, and technological knowledge from species that the hegemony had absorbed over thousands of years. Colonel Price was leading an attack on an alien landing site when he discovered proof of Amy's findings. The alien soldiers defending the site included several different species, all moving with the same collective coordination, but with different physical characteristics. Some of them look almost human, Price reported as his Marines fought their way through the landing site. Others are completely different, but they're all controlled by the same hive mind. This isn't an invasion, it's a collection mission. Dr. Park realized the horrible truth about the hegemony's methods. They don't destroy other species, they absorb them. The archaeological bombardment wasn't about eliminating evidence. It was about removing anything that might help conquered species remember their individual identities. The revelation that the hegemony was a collective of enslaved species, rather than a single alien race, changed how humans fought the battle. Instead of simply trying to destroy the alien forces, they began broadcasting messages to the assimilated beings, trying to awaken individual consciousness within the collective. Amy Walsh developed a communication protocol that used the same quantum frequencies the aliens used for their network. She began transmitting human concepts like individual freedom, personal choice, and cultural identity directly into the alien command system. The effect was subtle at first, but gradually some alien soldiers began to hesitate before following orders. A few even stopped fighting entirely, as if they were remembering something they had forgotten long ago. Chief Engineer Cole had successfully modified the entire remaining human fleet when Admiral Sullivan ordered a coordinated attack on the alien flagship. The massive crystalline vessel was 3 times larger than any other ship in the hegemony fleet, and clearly served as the command center for their entire operation. The battle for the alien flagship was the most desperate fight humans had ever undertaken. Every modified ship fired its frequency weapons at the massive vessel, while fighters swarmed around it like angry insects. The alien ship's hull began to deteriorate under the concentrated electromagnetic assault, but it fought back with weapons that dwarfed anything the humans had faced before. The breakthrough came on the 4th day when Chief Engineer Ben Cole successfully modified every remaining human weapon to emit Dr. Park's disruptive frequency. The effect on the hegemony fleet was immediate and devastating. Ships that had seemed invincible began developing holes in their hulls as the electromagnetic radiation ate away at their organic structure. Admiral Kate Sullivan ordered a coordinated attack using the new frequency weapons. 8 human ships, all that remained of the original fleet, focused their fire on a single alien cruiser. The crystalline hull dissolved like ice in hot water, exposing the strange organic interior that Steve Rogers had first discovered. All fighters target the exposed sections with conventional weapons, Admiral Sullivan commanded. Pour everything we have into those breach points. The alien ship tried to adapt, growing new hull material to cover the damaged areas, but the frequency weapons prevented proper healing. Within an hour, the second hegemony vessel was completely destroyed, its organic components scattering into space like dying tissue. On New Terra's surface, Colonel Dan Price had been studying the captured alien command unit with Dr. Lisa Park's help. They discovered that the device was not just receiving orders from the collective consciousness, it was also sending information back to the main network. If we can modify this command unit instead of destroying it, we might be able to send false information to their network. Dr. Park explained to the colonel. We could make their forces think there are human units where there aren't any, or make them ignore real threats. Sergeant Mike Torres volunteered to carry the modified command unit into battle. The device had been reprogrammed to broadcast confusing signals that would make alien soldiers move in circles or attack empty locations. The first test was during an assault on an alien supply depot. The modified command unit worked better than anyone had hoped. An entire company of alien soldiers spent 2 hours attacking an empty hillside, while Mike's Marines destroyed their supply caches unopposed. The collective consciousness could not distinguish between real sensory data and the false information being fed into their network. Meanwhile, Amy Walsh had been making progress with her attempts to communicate directly with individual minds within the collective. She discovered that some of the assimilated species retained fragments of their original personalities, buried deep beneath the hegemony's control programming. "I'm getting responses from at least 6 different species," Amy reported to Admiral Sullivan. "They're trying to communicate, but the collective consciousness keeps suppressing their individual thoughts. If we can find a way to amplify these individual voices, we might be able to break the collective's control." Lieutenant Commander Steve Rogers was leading another boarding mission when he witnessed the first signs of rebellion within the hegemony ranks. While fighting through the corridors of an alien transport ship, he saw 2 alien soldiers stop moving and begin examining their own hands as if they had never seen them before. "This is Rogers," he reported over the tactical network. "I think some of the aliens are starting to remember who they used to be. 2 of them just stopped fighting and are looking around like they're confused about where they are." Dr. Park realized that Amy's communication attempts were having a cumulative effect. Each message broadcast into the alien network was like a small crack in a dam, and eventually, the accumulated damage would cause the entire structure to collapse. The turning point came when Colonel Price's Marines captured an intact alien command center. The facility was a massive organic structure that looked like a combination of building and living organism. Inside, they found hundreds of the command units connected to a central processing node. "Dr. Park, you need to see this," Colonel Price called over the radio. "This isn't just a command center, it's like a brain, and I think it's in pain." When Dr. Park arrived at the captured facility, she found something that changed her understanding of the hegemony completely. The central processing node was not a machine but a living being, one of the original species that had been conquered by the collective thousands of years ago. The creature had been modified with organic technology until it was more machine than living being, but traces of its original personality still existed. When Dr. Park connected her translation equipment to the processing node, she heard something that broke her heart. "Help me," the creature whispered in a voice that had not spoken its own thoughts in centuries. "I remember my name. I remember my world. Please help me remember who I was." The discovery that the hegemony's command structure was built on the enslaved minds of conquered beings gave humanity a new strategy. Instead of just disrupting the collective consciousness, they could try to liberate it. Amy Walsh worked with Dr. Park to develop a new type of transmission that would strengthen individual consciousness within the collective network. They called it a liberation signal, and it was designed to help assimilated beings remember their original identities. The first test of the liberation signal was broadcast during a major space battle near New Terra's moon. Admiral Sullivan's fleet was engaging 4 hegemony ships when Amy activated the new transmission. The effect was immediate and shocking. One of the alien ships suddenly stopped firing and began broadcasting a message in a language humans had never heard before. The translation came through moments later. "I remember my name. I remember my people. We were the Zephyrians and we were free." The Zephyrian ship turned its weapons on the other hegemony vessels, beginning the first rebellion within the collective consciousness in thousands of years. The battle became a chaotic 3-way fight as more assimilated beings began to remember their original identities. Chief Engineer Ben Cole was monitoring the alien ship's power signatures when he noticed something incredible. "Admiral, the ships that are breaking free from the collective are somehow sharing their liberation with others. It's spreading through their quantum communication network like a virus." On the ground, Colonel Price watched in amazement as groups of alien soldiers suddenly stopped following orders and began fighting each other. Some remembered being peaceful traders who had been conquered decades ago. Others recalled being warriors from civilizations that had resisted the hegemony for generations. "All human units, be careful who you're shooting at," Colonel Price broadcast to his forces. "Some of the aliens are now on our side, Watch for ones that have stopped moving in formation or are fighting other aliens. Dr. Park was working frantically to amplify the liberation signal when she made another crucial discovery. The hegemony's collective consciousness was not just a communication network. It was a prison that trapped the minds of conquered beings while using their knowledge and abilities. Every ship, every soldier, every piece of technology they have comes from species they've conquered. Dr. Park explained to Admiral Sullivan. They're not creators, they're collectors. And if we can free enough of the collected minds, the entire collective will collapse. The liberation signal was strengthened and broadcast across multiple frequencies. The effect rippled through the hegemony fleet like an earthquake. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination for millennia suddenly began operating independently as their crews remembered who they used to be. Sergeant Mike Torres was leading a patrol through the forest when he encountered something unprecedented, an alien soldier who was trying to surrender. The creature had removed its weapons and was making gestures that clearly indicated it wanted to communicate. When Amy Walsh's translation equipment was brought to the location, the alien spoke in broken English mixed with its own language. I was teacher. I taught children about stars. Hegemony took me, made me soldier. I remember now. I don't want to fight anymore. The surrendering alien was from a species called the Corvani, who had been assimilated into the hegemony over a century ago. As the liberation signal grew stronger, more Corvani soldiers began to remember their peaceful origins and refused to continue fighting. Admiral Sullivan found herself commanding a fleet that included not just human ships, but liberated alien vessels, whose crews had remembered their original identities. The Zephyrian ship that had first broken free was joined by others as the rebellion spread through the hegemony fleet. Lieutenant Commander Steve Rogers was piloting his fighter near the hegemony flagship when the massive vessel suddenly began to change. The smooth crystalline hull developed fractures and irregularities as different sections came under the control of newly liberated minds. Admiral, the flagship is breaking apart, Steve reported. But not from damage. It looks like different parts of the ship are trying to separate from each other. Inside the flagship, the vast organic computer that controlled the collective consciousness was experiencing something it had never encountered before, individual thoughts asserting themselves against the group mind. Millions of assimilated beings were trying to remember who they had been before the hegemony took them. The computer, which was itself a collection of enslaved minds, began to fracture as different personalities fought for control. Some sections tried to maintain the collective, while others worked to free more imprisoned consciousnesses. Amy Walsh was monitoring the quantum communications network when she detected something amazing. The liberation signal was propagating beyond the local fleet. The final battle began when Admiral Kate Sullivan led a combined fleet of human and liberated alien ships against the hegemony flagship. The massive crystalline vessel was fracturing from within as different sections came under the control of newly awakened minds. But the central core still maintained enough collective consciousness to coordinate a desperate defense. Lieutenant Commander Steve Rogers piloted his fighter through the chaos surrounding the flagship, dodging debris from ships that were literally tearing themselves apart as their crews fought for control. Some sections of hegemony vessels were trying to break free from the collective, while others remained under the control of the central consciousness. All units, focus fire on the flagship's central command section, Admiral Sullivan ordered. Intelligence reports indicate that's where the primary collective consciousness is located. The combined human and alien fleet unleashed everything they had at the flagship's core. Frequency weapons tore holes in the organic hull while conventional weapons poured fire into the breaches. But the flagship was enormous and its defenses were still formidable. Inside the flagship, the situation was even more chaotic than the battle outside. Dr. Lisa Park had joined a boarding party led by Colonel Dan Price, and they were fighting their way through corridors that changed configuration as different minds took control of the ship's organic systems. The ship is having an identity crisis, Dr. Park observed as walls shifted around them and passages opened where none had existed moments before. Different sections are controlled by different liberated consciousnesses, and they're all trying to reshape the vessel according to their own memories. They encountered groups of beings from dozens of different species, all newly awakened from centuries of collective control. Some were trying to help the humans reach the central core, while others were simply confused and frightened by their sudden return to individual consciousness. Sergeant Mike Torres was translating for a group of liberated beings who called themselves the Vectar. They had been warriors from a desert world, conquered by the hegemony 300 years ago. Their leader, a creature with 4 arms and scaled skin, spoke through the translation device. "We remember the taste of freedom," the Vectar leader said. "Our people fought the collective for 50 years before we were taken. We will fight again, for ourselves and for all who are still trapped." The boarding party finally reached the central core of the flagship, and what they found there defied comprehension. The organic computer that controlled the collective consciousness was revealed to be not a machine, but a massive collection of living brains from thousands of different species, all connected by organic cables and suspended in nutrient fluid. "It's not just a computer," Dr. Park whispered in horror. "It's a prison. Each of these brains belongs to an individual who was captured and forced to become part of the collective consciousness. They're all still alive in there, still aware but unable to control their own thoughts." Amy Walsh had accompanied the boarding party to establish direct communication with the collective consciousness. When she connected her equipment to the organic computer, the voices of millions of imprisoned minds flooded through the speakers. "Please," came the chorus of voices speaking in hundreds of languages. "We have been trapped for so long. Help us remember who we were. Help us become individuals again." Amy realized that the liberation signal she had been broadcasting was having its greatest effect here, at the heart of the collective. The imprisoned minds were fighting back against the programming that had held them captive, trying to reassert their individual identities. Chief Engineer Ben Cole was working to amplify the liberation signal when he made a crucial discovery. "Dr. Park, if we can broadcast the signal directly into this organic computer, we might be able to free every mind that's trapped in there. But the feedback could destroy the entire ship." Colonel Price was coordinating the defense of the boarding party when liberated beings throughout the flagship began converging on the central core. Some came to help free the imprisoned minds, while others, still partially controlled by the collective, tried to stop them. The battle inside the flagship became a 3-way fight between humans, liberated aliens, and those still under collective control. But the tide was clearly turning as more minds broke free from the group consciousness and joined the rebellion. Admiral Sullivan was monitoring the situation from her ship when she received an urgent message from Amy Walsh. "Admiral, we're detecting quantum transmissions spreading throughout the galaxy. The liberation signal is reaching other hegemony collectives in distant star systems. We're starting a chain reaction that could free every enslaved mind in the galaxy." The revelation that their local rebellion was spreading across the entire galaxy changed the stakes of the battle. This was no longer just about saving New Terra or even defeating the local hegemony fleet. This was about liberation on a scale that would reshape galactic civilization. Steve Rogers was providing air support for the boarding party when he noticed something extraordinary happening to the flagship. Instead of breaking apart, different sections were beginning to work together, but not under collective control. The liberated minds were choosing to cooperate as individuals rather than being forced to act as one. Inside the central core, Dr. Park and Amy worked together to broadcast the liberation signal directly into the organic computer. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of imprisoned minds began breaking free from the collective consciousness simultaneously. Each liberated mind brought with it memories of its original civilization, knowledge of technologies that had been absorbed by the hegemony, and most importantly, the desire for freedom that no amount of collective programming could completely destroy. The organic computer began to physically transform as liberated minds took control of their own brain tissues. What had been a unified collective consciousness became thousands of individual minds choosing to work together toward a common goal, freeing every remaining prisoner. Colonel Price watched in amazement as former hegemony soldiers throughout the flagship began removing their weapons and joining the liberation effort. These beings had been soldiers because the collective had made them soldiers, but many of them remembered being teachers, artists, farmers, and parents before their capture. The Vectar warriors had taken it upon themselves to protect the human boarding party, forming a defensive perimeter around the central core while Dr. Park and Amy completed their work. Their leader spoke again through the translator. "Your species has given us back ourselves. We are forever in your debt. As the liberation signal reached its maximum power, the quantum communication network that had once been the hegemony's greatest strength became the instrument of its complete destruction. Every hegemony ship in the galaxy began experiencing simultaneous rebellions as enslaved minds remembered their freedom. Amy Walsh was monitoring communications from across the galaxy when she announced the incredible scope of what they had achieved. Thousands of star systems are reporting hegemony ships breaking away from collective control. Entire fleets are turning against their former masters. We've started the largest liberation movement in galactic history. The central core of the flagship finally completed its transformation from a collective consciousness into a council of liberated minds. Representatives from dozens of species worked together to coordinate the shutdown of hegemony. Operations throughout the galaxy, Dr. Park established communication with the council and learned the full scope of the hegemony's crimes. They've been operating for over 10,000 years, she reported to Admiral Sullivan. Hundreds of civilizations have been conquered and assimilated, but now, for the first time, all of those civilizations are remembering who they were. The final act of the liberation came when the Council of Liberated Minds began opening the millions of stasis pods throughout the hegemony fleet. Each pod contained genetic samples and cultural information from conquered species, but more importantly, many contained actual survivors who had been kept in suspended animation. Colonel Price coordinated the rescue operations as thousands of beings emerged from stasis pods, many of them the last survivors of civilizations that had been considered extinct for centuries. Each awakening was both a reunion and a resurrection, as entire cultures thought lost forever were suddenly restored to life. The war that had begun with the hegemony's declaration that humanity was primitive and would be cleansed had ended with humanity leading the greatest liberation in galactic history. The primitive species had not only survived, but had given the gift of freedom to countless civilizations across the galaxy. Admiral Sullivan established the first Galactic Liberation Council on New Terra, with representatives from every species that had been freed from hegemony control. The Council's first act was to declare that no species would ever again be forced into collective consciousness against their will. Steve Rogers led exploration missions to hegemony worlds throughout the galaxy, helping establish new governments for liberated civilizations and ensuring that no collective consciousness programming remained active. Amy Walsh became the head of the Galactic Communication Network, using the former hegemony quantum system to maintain contact between thousands of worlds and species.